All right, let's start today's Bible studies. Entitled, the question I'm asking is, do you want to jump years ahead in the blessing? Now, if you understand this is going to save you decades, it's going to accelerate your life. Where in the natural, if you do it in 10 years, you'll be a certain place, God can do it in 2. He can do things a lot quicker than what you have experienced and what you are used to. So today we're going to talk about how to go from where you are, point A, to point B, where you want to be. All right, which is manifesting more of the promises of God, whether it's your financial life, your health, your relationships, every area. And we're going to teach about how to go from point A, point B in the quickest amount of time, the most effective way of doing it, which is through God's ways. So I want to just illustrate a point that the God has his own ways, but the world also has its own ways. And we can choose to receive from the world or choose to receive from God. And I just want to clarify the fact that having the best things, the nice things, and enjoying life is not contrary to what God wants. And going through God's ways does not neglect these things. In fact, it is about producing these things in life. But when I mean God's ways, I mean that there's a path to those things. The world has a path to those things, but God also has a path to those things. Okay, so and what we got to understand is that, and what we got to know is that when we do it through God's path, it will produce life in every area. So we don't want to do it through the world's ways. What I learned is that when you do it through the world's wisdom, you might get what you're going after, but the sacrifice is far greater than what you got. You see, when we're talking about the area, let's say, of finances, and the world has its ways of doing business. To get to that certain point, I guarantee you will pay a price far higher than the money. Whether it's your relationship with your wife, children, family, your health, your mind, or the higher level you go in the world in receiving, let's say, finances, the price you pay far outweighs what you got, because there's an intoxication by doing it through God's ways. But does it mean getting those things is not right? No, it's not. That's not what we're saying. Those things are good. They're great. Having having a lot of money is very good, and something that we as Christians need to do. We need to drive the best, wear the best, live in the best. And when you do it through God's ways, guess what happens? You will get all those things plus the health, the wealth, the relationships, the marriages, in every blessed thing you can think of, because the blessing of the Lord maketh rich, and he added no sorrow to it. So today we're going to learn from point A to point B, God's ways, and you need to understand and make a decision right now that you're going to choose God's ways, because God's ways are different to man's. God's ways far exceeds man's ways, but you got to learn how to do it, because we're in this world, and we're so used to seeing somebody with some things we want and doing it through the world, but you don't see the full picture. So God has made a provision through the blood of Christ, not through our efforts, through the blood, because that blood is pure blood that put us back into relationship with the Father, meaning we are royalty. And we have power, we have authority to operate like how Jesus operated in his earthly ministry. Okay, so how does God do it? See, I'm setting the premises now because so we can understand it. We can understand. See, if we're not using the world's wisdom to get where we need to be, how does God do it? He does it through something called a mystery. And if you've been following me for a while, listening to my stuff, I always teach on mysteries, because mysteries are a powerful understanding in the kingdom. And when you get to understand what a mystery is, you understand how God works. So I got here in Matthew 13, verse 11. I'm going to read this verse, okay? And you'll know this verse. He answered and said to them, okay, this is Jesus answering the disciples, because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. Okay, so because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. And who's them? He's talking about the world. So we as Christians have something called a mystery and how to operate. And mysteries are this. They are the foolishness of God in operation. But guess what? The foolishness of God is wiser than men. So what I'm trying to get at is the way God does things doesn't make sense. And when the world looks at it, they think, how stupid are they to follow their God? That's what the world thinks. And this is an important point in mysteries because God requires faith. And if your mind and intellect can understand something, it doesn't require faith because it's logic. But faith sometimes doesn't make sense. And that's when you operate in the mystery. See, I see Christians also try to operate, trying to put logic sometimes in some situation, and that is good to have, which is correct. But when you go into the realm of mysteries, it does not make sense. It operates on the foolishness of God, meaning men think this is crazy. Well, people think, how can you be raised from the dead? Well, Jesus, he resurrected, didn't he? He resurrected. So if he resurrected, that is a mystery, the resurrection power. And when you say this to the world, the people, whether they want to believe it or not, some people think you're crazy. How can you think a man, which is not a man, Jesus is the Son of God, go and die and be resurrected? See, that's an example of a mystery. It is foolish. But the foolishness of God is wiser than men. So what we're about to learn today here is you're not going to find in a lot of YouTube channels, a lot of universities, this or that, because it's contrary to what's being taught in the world. But it will get results far greater than what the world can get. Now, I had to learn this. It's not something I made up. I had to learn this. I had to learn how to walk in mysteries. So today you're going to learn from A to B and understand that God's ways are far superior and that God does it through things as something called a mystery. And a mystery is the foolishness of God in operation. It won't make sense to the natural. You have to receive what I'm teaching by faith, by the Spirit, and you have to walk it out. And what's going to happen is you're going to go from A to B. And people are going to wonder, how did you do it at that amount of time without the compromise that a lot of people have been compromised with? Okay, so what the normal thinking is that when we're talking about accelerations with Christians is that it has to do with working more, praying more, fasting more, reading more, or serving more, and that will result in more of what Jesus has paid for on the cross. But see, the blood of Christ severed the relationship of a servant and master, where we are now a son and God is our Father. And in fact, the more we put effort into something, to chase something, the further we go away from it. So acceleration in our walk as a Christian, especially in the amplification of the blessing, doesn't happen by doing more. And a lot of us get into this mindset is because we are so used to how the world works. Hard work equals this, hard work equals that we try to put this mindset into our walk as a Christian, and it never works. And what it results in burnout, it results in frustration because we're trying to get somewhere and it's taking longer and longer and longer. And you see somebody else who don't put the same amount of effort, don't do what you're doing, yet are receiving what Jesus paid for on the cross. Just like the prodigal son, the son that spent a lot of stuff, wasted his father's goods, went away and came back, but then the father received him. And the other one was just, diligent in doing what the father asked him to do. I had to grow from this as well. It's not something you're going to learn and something you're going to get straight away, because when you receive Jesus as your Lord and Savior, the flesh had to die, and the flesh takes a process. So in the spirit, you have received him and born again. And just like a baby, being born again, you have to grow. You have to grow. And what stops that growth is that flesh. So the normal thinking is doing more equals more. That is not the case. That is a lie. And the devil wants you to do that and not get results. And then you start changing your theology and doctrine, thinking that God does not bless, God does not do this, that we're supposed to suffer, and that, God has put this on us. That is false. God has not done any of that. The work on the cross was finished. We're supposed to live abundant overflow. And if we are missing it, it's because of us, not because of God. And what we got to do is study the Bible, connect, and learn how to do this. All right. So it's not just wait 1 more year, 2 more years. No. If something hasn't been working for a long time, you need to check it and you need to say, nope, I have to change it now because there's something I'm missing. So we have adopted that worldly mindset, but that works in a need basis, a survival basis, and a slave mentality when it comes to hard work. But we are royalty. Remember, we are royalty by the blood of Christ. We have been put back with the Father, so we are royalty. So when we are talking about acceleration, abundant overflow, more than enough, it does not happen through hard work. It does not happen through hard work. And that's what holds it back. So today, if you're working hard and doing all these things, trying to add on more, you're going backwards. You're going backwards. Well, that's why I'm here, because I'm here to teach you how to do it properly. So what is that challenge? What's that thinking, that mindset I want to challenge you with? See, this is something you get now. You have to get it now. This sentence. The heart has to outpace the flesh. And now the question we must ask is how? Well, just to let you know, the heart goes on a journey as well as our flesh. When we're walking on a journey, our heart also is moving closer to the Lord. And our job as a Christian is to make sure our heart is moving faster than our flesh. See, our heart is on the inside. Our soul that's the posture we need to have towards God first before any other posture in the flesh. And when we understand how to move the heart faster than the flesh, we stop putting hard work there and stop adding this or that. We understand that it's something else that needs to move, which is the heart. And then you got to learn that. Now you need to learn, how do I move the heart at an accelerated pace, not the flesh? Because if the heart moves forward in the flesh, you stop adding more and you start producing and manifesting more of what Jesus paid for on the cross. Okay, so let's go to Luke. We're going to read at Luke chapter 17. All right, we're going to read Luke chapter 17, verse 11 to 14. Okay, let's read this. Okay, let's read this. Now it happened as he went to Jerusalem that he passed through the midst of Samaria and Galilee. Then as he entered a certain village, there met him 10 men who were lepers, who stood afar off, and they lifted up their voices and said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. So when he saw them, he said to them, Go show yourselves to the priests. And so it was that as they went, they were cleansed. As they went, they were cleansed. Okay, sorry, we're going to read from 11 to 14. Okay, so as they went, they were cleansed. So when he saw them, he said to them, Go show yourselves to the priest. And so it was, as they went, they were cleansed. Now this is important. Okay, I'm going to give you a key. You see, the heart has to outpace the flesh. And as a Christian, as I mentioned, we have to make sure our heart moves faster than the flesh. As they went, they were cleansed. Now this is an example of the heart which was moving ahead of the flesh. Because as they went, their heart was already healed. What Jesus said, they believed. And from what they believed, then they moved. And it started to produce healing in their life. So we're going to learn how to do that. You see, the belief comes first. But it's not just belief. Because the heart was positioned correctly. And Jesus said, do this. What did they do? They agreed with it and they said, I'm going to do it. And then as they went, they were healed. So we got to understand this. The heart moved. At that point, the heart moved faster than the flesh. And if your heart is not moving faster than the flesh, we're going to learn now. I'm going to teach you the key. Your healing won't take place, even though you might look like on the outside that you're doing the same thing as these guys here when 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 Jesus said, go show yourself to the priest. So I know many people who want to get healed and they're doing all these faith things, but it doesn't work. But here, if you look at it from the outside, they did it and they were healed. Why I didn't do it and I'm not? Why I'm doing it and I'm not healed? Well, that's the question we will answer. Because the heart moved faster here, but with you and what you're dealing with, there's something we still need to work on in the heart. And that heart represents our old mindset, our old ways. The flesh is stopping that. Is the flesh is that thing that's stopping us from moving forward. So the key is in Genesis 28. Okay, Genesis 28. Now I'm going to take my time in a way because I really want you to get this. In Genesis 28, let's go there. Let's read it. Genesis 28 verses 18 to 22. Let's read it. All right, what are we going to do? 18 to 22. All right. Then Jacob rose early in the morning and took the stone that he had put on his head, set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel. But the name of that city had been Luz previously. Then Jacob made a vow saying, if God be with me. See, Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me and keep me in this way that I'm going, and give me bread to eat and clothing to put on, so that I come back to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set as a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. So the key to making your heart outpace your flesh is about making a vow unto the Lord. That's the key I want you to get today, the oath that you make unto the Lord. See, Jacob made an oath that God, if you protect me, do this, do this, do this, do this, I promise that place will be called your house, and surely I will give a tenth to you. What? See, it could be any transaction, okay? But I'm giving an example of that transaction. Is that Jacob said, God, if you protect me and keep me alive and prosper me, do this, that, then out of that I will fill your house, I will glorify you. That's essentially what it is. And this then causes Jacob to do what he needed to do. But in this action of faith, because faith without actions is dead, the heart was constantly in front of the flesh. See, if we don't understand this, we think that Jacob just walked. And if we do the same things without making an oath unto the Lord of what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, what begins to happen is that nothing will bring fruit. So, and this is powerful because you are making a deal with God. You are doing business with the Lord. And if you do a deal with the Lord, then he will honor you and cause things to happen because you have vowed this. And this is the key on how to make sure the heart moves ahead of the flesh. And when that happens, the acceleration process begins because God becomes your guarantor. Just like any business, who is your guarantor? If something fails, that person will back you up. God, so when you make a vow unto the Lord, and that is a key, because I don't see many people doing this and understanding and wondering why things won't work. See, some people might have health issues, financial issues, and they're saying, heal me, bless me, but they haven't made a vow. But you've heard stories when people are healed, before they were healed, they said, God, if you heal me from this, I will dedicate my life to you. And then they were healed. See, the deal has to benefit God. That vow has to benefit God. And how does it have to benefit God? He needs to get glory out of that. This is the kind of Father we serve, that he trusts us. And we say, Lord, you increase me financially, I will give more into your kingdom. Now, I get specific sometimes. I say, Lord, I want to give X amount of dollars. Or Lord, I want to put this much time. And what he does is he continues to put his hand on my life. And as I move and things come, I don't back down from the deal, the promise that I made unto the Lord. See, we keep talking about God's promises. What promise have you made to the Lord? See, the oath is about sonship. It's not about servanthood. When we still think we're servant master, we're waiting on God to do something, then we'll do it. But in the move of a son to a father, sonship, because we've been redeemed from a servant master relationship, I make the vow. I make the promise unto the Lord. And when I make the promise unto the Lord, then he backs me up. And then when it's come time for me to fulfill my part of the bargain, guess what? I fulfill it. See, that means he puts me in control and in responsibility. We're always asking God about the promises God made. The promises, God, you promised this. God, you promised this. And that's good when you're a baby. But when you're a matured Christian, and this, I'm speaking to matured Christians. This channel is for matured Christians, how to accelerate, how to scale, go to another level means you got some things right as well, but you need to learn a few other things to continue to explode to another level. You see, the deal has to benefit God in the glory, so he gets glory in it. But when you understand this and what I'm teaching, it almost sounds blasphemy when God is saying, this is what you promised me. Because Christians who haven't walked with God and are still immature saying, God, this is what you promised me. But, my relationship with the Lord is this. I say, Lord, you do this, then I will do this. So God is asking me, so God would do it for me. He would do it for me. He's always done it for me. And then when it comes time for me to pay up, he will say, this is what you promised me, Suresh. So then I have to fulfill my end of the bargain because I can't, because if God's already done his end, I was sure to be in abundant overflow, more than enough, just joy, happiness, peace, everything. What Jesus paid for on the cross, and I fulfill my end of the bargain. That is the key you need to get today, that you need to make an oath and a vow unto the Lord saying, in whatever area, if it's your health, if it's your marriage, example, Lord, you fix my marriage. I will serve you all the days. I will give. This is what it's like, a deal you have to make. You have to transact business with your father. And what he would do, he would play his end of the bargain first. This is how you walk with God, not the other way around saying, God, do this, because he don't know if you're going to do the other thing. So if God overloads you with what he paid for on the cross, it's going to hurt you because you haven't been trained. The flesh hasn't died. So when you make a deal with the Lord, he does all these things, and then you fulfill your end of the bargain. But to get into that zone, to be confident in fulfilling it and doing business with the Lord, you need to grow, obviously, in something called sanctification. But first of all, understand God wants glory, so the deal has to benefit God in him getting glory. And how does he get glory? Well, in Psalm 35 verse 27, it says, God takes pleasure in the prosperity of his servant. Psalm 35 verse 27. Let's get to that. So I've got some stuff here I really want you to get. Psalm 35 verse 27. Let them shout for joy and be glad who favor my righteous cause. And let them say continually, let the Lord be magnified who has pleasure in the prosperity of his servant. So God getting glory is what he finds pleasure in, and he finds pleasure in prosperity. So we need to understand that the greater level we walk in the prosperity of God, financial, health, wealth, relationship, marriage, every area of our life, the more he gets glory, the more he takes pleasure in it. So that means our walk has to be a sanctification walk. Prosperity in all areas. And the entrance into prosperity is finances, by the way. That's the least of the kingdom. Prosperity is a product of sanctification. Salvation is important. And salvation is a key, it is a start. And that's when you become a candidate of the blessing, because you need to receive Jesus as your Lord and Savior. But when you're born again, it's all in the spirit. So sanctification is how it comes out into your life and you're living it out. So all Christians, through salvation, are blessed, but blessed on the inside. That's where you're born again. Sanctification is the process of pulling out what's on the inside out. This is what I'm talking about. Sanctification is a matured walk. That's why what I'm talking about, if you're hovering between the salvation, sinning, not sinning, sinning, not sinning in that line, you won't get what I'm talking about in terms of salvation. I'm talking about acceleration. I'm not talking about getting back to zero. I'm talking about going from 2, 4, 8, 12, 20, 100, acceleration, scaling. And that is a product of sanctification. And we can experience the blessing of God now in this life, right now. But that only happens when you're growing in sanctification. So many Christians are stuck at a certain level, okay? Because why? The simple answer is they've stalled in their sanctification walk. I'm going to explain a line to you as well, just a note so you get a context of what I'm trying to teach. There's a point in your life before salvation, and some people take their whole life to get to salvation. There's a point in salvation and the point after that, which is sanctification. And people take their whole life to start walking into sanctification. That's the eye of the needle. And after sanctification, that's acceleration and scaling. Okay, so if you're stalled somewhere. But if you're stalled and it's not moving as fast as what we are talking about here, growing, it's because you're stalled in the sanctification walk. You see, sanctification is not an event, it's a journey. Because after you die, you go into glory and you continue your walk, okay? And you're not hindered with the flesh. See, it's a journey, it's not a one-time event. And sanctification walk is anchored in something called grace. Grace, not faith. I used to think the other way around. My faith needs to get stronger. But God said, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move, and it moves. So this tells me I don't even need much faith. So what is the issue from you going from one level to another level in acceleration and bypassing years of wasted effort? It is something called grace. So a sanctification walk, which produces prosperity, is a walk of grace. And what Jesus did on the cross is grace. Our foundation as a Christian, we have to go on a journey in grace. Grace is not a one-time event. It is a journey. And the deeper you walk in grace, or the further you walk in grace, the more you will produce the blessing of God. And when we're walking in grace, that is doing it God's way. The wisdom of the world goes through the faith direction without grace. But grace, God's way, walks into grace with faith together. But that faith is anchored in grace. But the world's faith is anchored in intellectual understanding, the world's wisdom. But the God's way is faith anchored in the mystery of the kingdom. And that's why they produce different things. The blessing of the Lord maketh rich, and he added no sorrow to it. That's one of my favorite verses, because when God takes you to another level, you will experience a joy like no other. And you'll be wondering, how did I get here so fast, so quick? And I still have everything intact, not just intact, everything growing and excelling. Just joy and happiness. That's God. Okay, so anyway, the sanctification walk happens through prosperity. Prosperity happens through sanctification, and it's anchored in grace. So, what is the master grace? The sowing grace. The master key to walk in sanctification is the sowing grace. And guess what? Specifically in the area of money. Now, if you've been walking with me for a while, you understand I'd always hit on this point every single time I'm teaching the Bible, because money is the least of the kingdom. It's the least. This is like the entrance to the supernatural. It is like an entrance to the sanctification walk. Remember I said in that line, there's a salvation point and then a sanctification point. In between, people walk in no man's land. This is like the wilderness. And until they reach that eye of the needle, what's that point? When you understand that money is the least of the kingdom and you begin to plant your tithes and offerings. After that point, you walk into sanctification. But many people also get stuck after planting one, and they don't go further because they think it's a destination. The journey of sanctification. Sanctification is a journey. It is a non-stop journey. So it's not just you plant a seed. It's then you become a skillful sower. Okay. So the sowing grace is the master key to sanctification. And you have in the sowing grace, because it's about sowing is about planting and then harvest, planting, resurrection. But you have to anchor in the financial aspect of the sowing grace, because money is actually God's spiritual tool for a believer to grow in sanctification. So you might have prayer, fasting, and all that, and those are good things to have, serving, but you haven't got money down pat. You won't go far in your sanctification walk. Why? Because we live in an economic world, and unless you continue to crush the spirit of mammon, you will never get far. The devil will keep you praying, keep you fasting, keep you serving, and you still being broke, stuck, dealing with health issues, dealing with marriage issues, dealing with relationship issues, dealing with your finances. But yet you think you're going in the direction of sanctification. You're not. Unless you plant that seed and understand that money is the entrance, the least of the kingdom, you won't get far in your sanctification. So you have to understand the sowing grace is the key. It is the beginning walk. It is about planting seeds and learning how to walk in that. And this is why it's a mystery of the kingdom. Okay? And how well you understand how the sowing grace works determines how far you walk in sanctification. See, it's a skill. And this is why it's a mystery. Because when you plant seed, money equals life in this world. But when you give it and plant it, wherever on the journey you are dying to this world to produce life. And that's why it's a mystery, because it looks like you're going backwards. But it's because in your sanctification walk with grace, the sowing grace, something has to die before you can resurrect in a new level of power and operation. So when the money dies, you look like you're going backwards, but it engages in the Spirit of God, the resurrection power, which means death has to happen first before life. Now, there is another mystery you have to understand, that the spirit of mammon attaches to our flesh. And we cannot let go of it. That's why prayer, fasting, and all this cannot let go of that spirit of mammon. And when the money comes and we plant it and sow it, the sowing grace, there is a spiritual thing that happens. That when that seed, that financial seed dies, mammon goes with it. There's no other way to release mammon off your flesh, but mammon goes with that seed. So when the mammon goes with that seed and gets buried, that's why it's most powerful spiritual tool. When it resurrects, that which needs to be dead stays dead, and that which needs to come alive comes alive. So you kill that part of mammon, and guess what happens? You resurrect into new life without that flesh holding mammon with it. That means if mammon is not there, God can give you more, and yet it will not control you. So now then you are eligible for the deeper things of God. This is a powerful teaching you need to get. See, the flesh has to die, and when you sow at each level, a part of your flesh dies. Because where you're going, that mammon, the spirit of mammon, that part of your flesh cannot go with you. Where God wants to take you with the abundant overflow life, some parts of your flesh that has the spirit of mammon on it cannot come with you. And what God needs you to do is kill it through sowing, the sowing grace in finances. And when it goes into the ground, there's something that happens, that the mammon stays in the ground because it doesn't have life, so it dies. But the Spirit of God is in you, so it produces life. So the resurrection power brings you to a new level of operation, a new flesh that the spirit of mammon does not hold. And this works on every level of faith, every level of growing with God. This is how acceleration happens. It looks like you're going backwards, and you lose your grounding with people, because they might be on the same point, but when you work on the sowing grace, it looks like you're going backwards. So people are still increasing with worldly wisdom on a linear scale, and it looks, oh gosh, they're moving so far ahead. And then boom, when the resurrection power on the third day, that acceleration goes, and their speed will never be able to keep up, because you keep climbing up. Because what the Lord does, he does forever, and you'll never go back. See, these guys that work on the world wisdom has to always maintain, otherwise they go back. But with the resurrection power, what the Lord does, he does forever. You will break a barrier and there's no way coming back. There's no way. And what's your job? To break another level, to keep going through the resurrection power. So today I'm asking you to get involved in sowing seed. I want you, as you listen to this channel with the Bible studies, is to teach you how to walk in the sowing grace. That's what I'm specialized in. That's what I have on my life, a mantle that I have received from a prophet. That I've walked in the sowing grace, and I understand how it works. And it's still a greater walk for me, because you never finish with God. But you have to understand how acceleration works. So when I make an oath to the Lord and make sure he gets the deal, a good deal out of it, which is his pleasure, his glory, which that means prosperity. It has to be involved with sanctification. And sanctification has to be involved with the sowing grace. Because God, you cannot live the abundant life that Jesus died for if you are not over it in terms of being able to control yourself when you receive all those things. God puts you to a testing ground. You can't just get it for nothing. There's a price to pay, and that price is that walk with the Lord. Not the price that Jesus paid for on the cross. It's a different kind. So today I want you to sow your seed. And I want to take you on another journey, another level. See, when you stretch your seed, this is important. Because when we're talking about the sowing grace, especially in the area of money, some people give but don't grow because they don't understand how to stretch their seed. I'm going to explain a few things and then we're done. You see, sowing, we're talking about money now. We've shifted now into the area of finances because we're talking about the least of the kingdom. Sowing has to do with us willing to go to the grave. So when we stretch the seed, and I'm going to tell you teach you what stretching is, you simulate the promise we made to God through an oath. You see, money has to do with the heart. You cannot serve God or mammon. You can either serve one or the other. And when you give your leftovers to God, it does not work. You have to give above and beyond, and you have to stretch, meaning you have to go to levels that you have not been on in giving. And when that happens, it simulates your oath. You say, Lord, if you bless me this much, this, that, I will do this. And you step out first by stretching your seed and provoking the move of the glory. And that simulates the promise that you have made unto God. Then God backs it up. See, the link to the glory is the resurrection. So to fulfill your part, your seeds must be sown. And not just sown, it must be stretched to simulate the speed of your heart. See, just like when Jesus called Peter to walk on water, you don't sow with what you have. You sow to where you want to go. This is a powerful revelation. I learned that for me to walk in sanctification and to accelerate, the promises I made unto God first. I make the deals that I make unto God. I provoke it by stretching my seed. Because in the stretch is the velocity of how your heart moves quicker than the flesh. Remember we talked about your heart must move quicker than your flesh. And in that velocity, in that stretch, you're provoking a move of the glory, which is the resurrection power. And as you walk like this, day in, day out, your faith is sufficient. You're anchored in grace. And you're provoking a move of the glory. because of the oath you made, and you begin to watch God move in your life, because every one of these things have to play its part for things to work. You cannot make an oath to God and then you give him your leftovers and then you check at the end of the day what I have, and then that's what I'm going to give. That doesn't provoke. That means you've lied. That means you don't trust in the Lord. You see, it's important that we learn these things and how to operate. These are skills to learn. You know, some people maybe never told you how you have to stretch your seed and just give what you can. That's a lie. You have to stretch your seed because God will always come through with a harvest. But some people haven't received harvest because they're giving like donations. I stretch my seed even before God moves. I move. And God has to come through because I say, God, if you continue to bless me, I'll give more. So not only God will fulfill his part, and then he asked me to fulfill mine. I try and beat him by trying to fulfill my part first before he. So I'm playing a game with the Lord in terms of trying to beat him. But of course you can't because he's God. So I stretch first to say, God, I want to fulfill my promise first. And then God says, no, I can't let that, because I'm God. I can't let that happen. I have to go first. So you understand, you're both walking. You're walking in sync forward. The stretch simulates the forward movement of your life. You sow where you want to go. You don't sow what you have. You sow where you want to go. That's why it's a very powerful spiritual tool. So the link is in my description. You sow a seed, stretch your seed. Now, the point is your goal is supposed to, your goal, what I have for this channel is important. Your goal is to reach that $1,000 sower. And why? Because I start, a different path on that. There's a discipleship path that you go after becoming a $1,000 sower. And that's where, I coach in groups, not just this YouTube stuff, personalized, in groups. And what you're getting on this YouTube channel is more than enough to get you to that 1,000 sowers. So if you don't even have 1,000 to give, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you start sowing. I started at $5 and then I moved to 10 and I moved. So the revelation you're getting right now is more than enough to get you into $1,000 sower. But you need more than that to move up ahead into a $10,000 and beyond. So that's why the coaching happens after that. But that's what your goal should be. If you're sowing $1, sow 10. If you're sowing 10, sow 100. If you sow 100, sow 1,000. You have to stretch. Because there's another set of teaching you need to get, which I don't do on this channel here. Because it goes into deeper things in terms of the vertical alignment, the family unit, and all this stuff here. And, that's the private group coaching. But what you're getting here and on this channel and all that stuff that I have out is more than enough for you to begin your journey of acceleration scaling. So get on the link, tap on the link, sow a seed, stretch your seed, whatever level you're on, stretch your seed. If you've been with me with the private coaching and you're still there, this is how you stretch your seed. The links are all there. And go to another level. And I pray that your life continue to be blessed and that your mind be renewed, and that you have to understand that you are royalty. You're not a slave, you're royalty. And acceleration, amplification, scaling, all this is your right, because you are a child of God and Jesus paid for this already. So I thank you in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. God bless.